We will examine what is ethics. An ethical action is not something that we do because people have been following it for years. On the other hand, ethics is built on rationality. The term ethics is derived from the Greek word ethos. Ethos means custom or character. Ethics is used as a framework to tell whether someone is vicious or virtuous. It studies whether a certain action or a decision taken by a person is right or wrong, whether such an action is morally good or bad. So in that sense, I think it is built on morality. But given two contradicting situations, how do we act? More than that, ethics focuses on how we ought to act or conduct ourselves. It is also said that ethics is grounded on rationality. We use our reason to arrive at a decision. Whatever moral judgments we take, our actions should be justifiable. In most of the cases, morality might not be justifiable as to why somebody should not wear jeans or shorts or should not wear long hair, etc. They might be construed as morally not so sound and morally bad, but ethics is not about that. You have to justify. Ethics is also a branch of philosophy, a philosophy that leads to reflection. It does not discuss conduct right away. It pushes individuals to reflect on their actions. These reflections on the actions are systematic, scientific, rational and critical investigations. Ethics, some say, should not be confused with social conventions and religious beliefs and the law. Ethics refers to rules governed by professional guidelines within a particular place. So in that case, I think we are going to have code of conduct in workplaces. We have code of conduct, for doctors, for police, for journalists and for other professionals. And our ethics should be free from our own prejudices, biases, preferences, likes, dislikes, etc. Though ethics and morality are used interchangeably, scholars claim that both are not the same. Ethics is a theory of right action for the greater good. Ethics studies the underlying principles of morality. On the other hand, morality largely is prescriptive. So we were discussing, the normative form of morality. Most of us follow moral standards without questioning because we have been doing this, for years. So we might be following a certain code of conduct, not because this is justifiable, but for the simple reason that we have been following this for years. Some scholars say that morality is associated with religion, family, society and other institutions. So most of these institutions prescribe codes of conduct. Ethics, on the other hand, is associated with professions like medicine, law and business. We can also include journalism. Now, the example that I gave earlier about the doctor and the abortion surgery. The doctor and the abortion, in that particular example, she is guided by religion. On the one hand, she is guided by religion, and on the other hand, she is expected to follow the ethical principles and the code of conduct prescribed by the hospital for which she is working or as part of medicinal ethics. But she is caught between two of these things, so she has to choose one over the other. So religion is prescribing something and ethics from the professional setting is prescribing something else. So in this context, morality and ethics are not the same. Now let us look at an example. For instance, you as a journalist, if you are working on a story and you find out that a ration shop is cheating people by way of weighing or manipulating the weight of rice and sugar. You have captured the stories and you bring it to the table, you bring it to the editor says go ahead because it is a good story. In the meantime, the administrators and authorities belonging to the ration shop come to know about this and they approach the editor and they are trying to negotiate with him. Now, what is the editor going to do? Is the editor going to kill the story or publish the story? Now, here is two possible courses of action that one could take and what decision is going to be taken. That is where ethics comes. Thus, media practitioners may be morally good and ethically right. To give you another example, if you as a journalist, if you are facing pressure not to report on an issue, in that case you are being influenced by your boss, by your editor, by your desk editor, or sometimes by your boss from the headquarters, or there could be another force that is acting upon you, which could be an external force, and that restrains you, that stops you from publishing the story. This is an organizational restraint, or this could be an external force as well. It would thus mean that by not reporting on a particular issue or a sensitive issue, you are being led to become an ethically unsound person, and you go off the rails. But on the other hand, it's important that we as journalists should practice self-restraint. So we are talking about freedom of expression, freedom on the one hand, which is also what the Constitution is talking about, freedom as well as self-restraint, and these are the two moral guidelines that our Indian Constitution talks about. Self-restraint is needed. There's a peculiar case of a news channel relaying a celebrity caught up in a sex scandal, and this channel chose to relay this particular content 24/7, hours on end, non-stop relay of this particular content. And what kind of impact would this have on children? What kind of psychological impact would this have on children? So that is completely ignored and neglected. So what the channel was more interested in, it was more interested in maximizing the profit, and about which we are going to see in the second component. So in such cases, a media practitioner is likely to be prejudiced and probably wants to suppress information or report in someone's favor. When you are defaming someone, or when you are overemphasizing on something without actually worrying about the consequences such reporting might have on people, I think you are prejudiced and biased. On both counts of organizational pressure, the example which I talked about earlier, and lack of self-restraint in this case, that the over emphasis or indulgence in relaying a particular content, which is an unpleasant content, but I don't know if there is any need to relay this content 24/7. So what we are doing is something that is morally bad and ethically wrong. So, and we are immediately reminded of an interesting quote by Dr. Ambedkar. When it comes to ethics and economics, he says, history shows that where ethics and economics come in conflict, victory is always with economics, right? That's the channel is more interested in hiking up, in ramping up the TRP ratings. So even recently we might have come across a news story about how TRP ratings were manipulated by a news channel. On the other hand, another scholar by name Rosi Braidotti, who is a continental philosopher, talks about morality and ethics in completely different ways. She says morality is a discourse on norms and protocols, or a system of rules. On the other hand, ethics is a discourse on power and forces. Now that's quite an interesting argument. She says ethics is a discourse on power and forces. In this sense, what she's trying to advance is that there are always power and forces and some kind of a pressure that are always going to be exerted upon people and individuals. For example, if a particular pressure or force is going to have a positive impact on me, then probably I will feel enabled, I'll feel empowered, and I'll also be in a position to express my thought, my actions, my voice without fear and favor. Therefore, I could possibly be able to exhibit a sense of what you call as an ethical being. On the other hand, if this power factor or power dynamics or some of these forces and pressure happen to have negative impact on me, then I'm going to feel weakened, I'm going to feel debilitated, which would affect me from expressing whatever I want to express, and therefore would also affect me or prevent me from expressing a sense of what you call as an ethical being, right? Or an ethical, I'll stop being an ethical person. This would also result in my not being able to have what you call as affirmative, not being able to take an affirmative action, not being able to take an affirmative decision. So affirmative ethics is possible only when you feel empowered. So it all depends on the kind of forces that surround us. Let's now look at an example to understand how moral judgments change with age. Piaget observed and interviewed Swiss boys playing marbles. It's a popular game in Switzerland. Piaget wanted to know how the boys understood the moral rules and how they practiced their rules and what kind of consciousness they had about these rules. But what he observed and what he found interesting was the fact that the elder children, when they played with younger children, they allowed these younger children to shoot the marbles from inside the circle. But while playing this particular game, usually they should shoot the marbles from outside the circle. Given the fact that the younger child or younger children would have weaker hands, elder children allowed them to play from inside the circle, allowed them to shoot the marbles from inside the circle. Now, this is where I think we need to understand what fairness is all about. So, in order to have equality, this is something that elder children accomplished. This is something we need to understand when you're talking about reservation policies. This is something that our Indian Constitution is also talking about. So, when you're talking about this, then I must refer to Gandhiji's non-violence. In fact, Gandhiji's ethical principles are quite a number, like varied. He has talked about non-violence, ahimsa, and stuff like that. And so, with respect to non-violence, this is what he says: I object to violence because when it appears to do good, the good is only temporary. The evil it does is permanent. So, Gandhiji propagated non-violence as an ethical doctrine. Why is this important in today's context? We are talking about social media and hate messages and hate speech, and there's a lot of violence that is performed on social media. Verbal abuse is taking place, shaming women is taking place, and all of this is contradictory to what Gandhiji said. We have seen what is morality and what is ethics. To recap, morals are rules of conduct. Morals are about what is good and what is bad. For example, giving is good, sharing is good, but on the other hand, killing is bad and telling lies is bad. We have this even in our rhymes: telling lies no papa. On the other hand, ethics is about an action that is to be taken based on rationality. So, there should be a reason. It should evaluate the conduct or our behavior. It should scrutinize and validate whether a particular action that we have taken or whether a particular decision that we have taken is right or wrong. This action may break the rules or may not break the rules. To add, morals are discussed and deliberated. So, we can talk about morals, whether abortion should be legalized, so on and so forth. And during our dinner conversations or in our conversations, we can have lengthy discussions on these topics. But on the other hand, ethics calls for our own resolutions. So, there should be an action, and these actions should be justifiable. Thank you.